Welcome to episode 4 of What the Trans US edition. I am Alyssa Steinzik.
I am Valeriya Martindale.
And we are futuristic and wearing really cool glasses and trench coats.
They did not go out of style in 1999, no matter what your parents tell you.
I don't care what they said. So I'm here to ask you the most important question.
Okay.
What's up? I don't have one this week. I couldn't think of anything good. Couldn't think of anything funny. Took 4 episodes.
I've got a good one. Me. Well, I say good one. I say I have a bad one that I know you're not going to be able to answer. Who's your favorite Wrasslin person? Actually,
no, I have no idea. I'm kind of into John Cena's weird. Is it him with the weird Chinese thing?
Oh yeah, the meme where he was talking about ice cream in Chinese and everyone went crazy for it.
Where he's just like really,
I'm sorry, Chinese isn't a language, really, Mandarin.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes they call it Chinese, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese. It's a thing. Sure. But yeah, Mandarin. I guess he speaks Mandarin. He's very, very invested in the PRC. I'll go ahead and say that's not a problem for me. I think, like as a self-identified anarcho-communist, I think that the PRC has some issues. Certainly, they engage in genocide. Xi Jinping is like a political black bag kind of guy, but I don't inherently view China as like an evil place because I'm normal.
Sure, yeah.
Certainly not any worse than America, but I do think that's funny that he's just like really into the PRC and he learned Chinese. And he's like, what do you think his social credit score is? Pretty good?
Oh, God. We're getting into full-on Redditor jokes here. We have to shut the whole podcast down. We're done. This is the last episode.
Moving on to our Toby Keith is Dead podcast.
I can't cry before another podcast. From laughing.
Not again.
Laughing, not laughing. I'm not... I promise I'm not sad about Toby Keith.
Stop reminding me that he's dead. I'm so sad.
It's wrecked me emotionally. How am I supposed to know what to do with my pickup?
To clarify, this is a thing that we joked about a lot before, I think, recording episode 3. Now we're talking about it publicly.
Because we're dumb.
We're not going to start a Toby Keith podcast. I grew up in the South. I'm really into country music and bluegrass. And I hate guys like Toby Keith because I think they kind of ruined country, like the perception of country music for a very long time, kind of conflating it with this awful stadium country vibe. Bo Burnham joked about it in one of his specials. And I was, like I told you when we first were discussing Toby Keith's death, there's like a Rolling Stones story by Ethan Hawke claiming that at Willie Nelson's 70th birthday party, Chris Christopherson said of Toby Keith that he was to country music as pantyhose are to finger fucking. Which is just an incredible insult. What a fantastic insult.
And then Toby Keith assumed it was about him and jumped up and took that bullet full in the face, which you couldn't have tortured that out of me. I would have been like, oh, I guess you were talking about somebody else who does bad country.
Right. To clarify, Ethan Hawke didn't name Toby Keith. I forget what he called him, like the Idol or something, because he was real big at the time. This was like just post 9/11, and he was doing his big I love America shtick, and everybody was eating it up. So Ethan didn't name him. He just called him a pseudonym, and then Toby Keith heard about the story and went, "Hey, fuck you, buddy.
I heard what you said about me.
I heard what you said." Classic.
Why don't you come to my grave and talk to me about it?
Enough about Toby Keith. How have you been? What have you been up to in the last 2 weeks?
God, I've been preparing to go to a convention of various nerd things very soon.
Ooh.
That should be interesting. My friends group really likes going. They usually wind up cosplaying. I'm usually just there holding bags and smiling at strangers as they ask for pictures. So that's fun. But they're usually a pretty good time.
You talked about before you'd like to cosplay Marcel from Dungeon Meshi, Delicious in Dungeon.
They want to do a full group cosplay.
Yeah, and specifically you want to be Marcel with the cabbage jammed in her staff hole.
It's my favorite look when they're all just loaded down with vegetables looking ridiculous.
I think that's great. I would have a hard time choosing between that Marcel and like dumb Marcel who heard a mandrake scream.
Unfortunately, I can't make my eyes look the wrong ways. Otherwise, I would.
Just looking in completely opposite directions, and she's just like, I want to feel like I didn't let down my friends.
Which really is a vibe that I recognize.
That's the same. The woman who voices her also plays the redhead in One Piece in the live action adaptation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's so good as Marcel. I haven't seen One Piece. I've heard it's good though. Good adaptation. We've been getting a few of those. The Yu Yu Hakusho adaptation was really good.
I'm a little confused by them, honestly. Like taking something that's known for letting you do big, crazy things and then trying to distill it down into a more like, quote unquote realistic live action format always seems like a difficult project to have to undertake.
Absolutely. And, a big thing too is like sometimes a piece of media just can't be done in another format. Sometimes a book does not work in live action or things in a book. That's why when they adapt books and comic books and stuff, they do change things, not because they hate you and think you should suffer, as a lot of dweebs seem to think, but mostly just because there are things that work and things that don't in a visual medium. And not everything written down is going to work in a visual medium. Speaking of, I spent the last 2 weeks watching the Fallout adaptation, which I actually thought was pretty good.
I've been hearing pretty good things, yeah. Everyone seems to like it.
You might hate it just because, as we've discussed privately, you just don't like Fallout. You just like Obsidian.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Or Black Isle. Is that what they were called before?
Yeah, I love the idea of Fallout, but tonal inconsistencies, the way Bethesda handles the writing and all, it's just, I want to like it so bad, and I'm right on the cusp a lot of the time, but I don't know, I'll still probably give it a shot at some point. I get it, and there's goofiness. The head writer, Emil, whatever his name is, I think I showed you those tweets where he was like, hey, you remember Nate from Fallout 4? He's that war criminal.
Yeah. And then he gets called out Emil. By, called out by 6,000 people on Twitter, as normally happens. And he basically, his response was like, when I said that's Nate, what I actually meant was that's not Nate.
I let my inside voice become my outside voice, and I did a whoa.
Yeah. Oopsie. Yeah, I thought the show was really good. Ella Purnell is a phenomenal actress. I love her to bits in like everything I've ever seen her in. I think she was the blue-haired girl in the Lesbian League show.
Oh, really?
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, she played Jinx, adult Jinx. Of course, the inimitable Walton Goggins is fantastic.
Playing what he was born to play, a ghoul.
I know, just a nasty little freak in the desert, killing people with a sawed-off lever action rifle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I love him to death. I don't know if he is a cisgender heterosexual white man. Every chance he's terrible in his private life. I don't know. I can't. The older I get, the less I'm inclined to, as the kids say, stan. But I do every time I see Walton in anything. I'm like, it's that guy, Leonardo DiCaprio pointing gif. It's that guy. I love him.
It's me every time I see Keanu in something. Which, oh God, horrors of horrors. He's going to be in the third Sonic the Hedgehog movie that I don't care about. And now I have to watch it. Great.
He's voicing Shadow, right?
Hedgehog, yes.
What? Just the fact that they put him in the movie to begin with.
Baffling.
And then said, you know who should voice this guy? We're going to get Keanu in here to voice Shadow the Hedgehog.
Chill dude.
Yeah. I don't know. That was a decision. I think if he hadn't turned out to be a sex pest, DC Douglas would have probably been the guy for that role, right? Just being a fuckboy creep.
In some ways, his voice is a little more, he's got a tone to him that's sort of like someone you would hear in a governmental position being a fuckboy, less so like experimented hedgehog with a gun.
An Albert Wesker, if you will.
Yeah, a little bit Weskery. There's like a gravitas to his voice that's a little too much for Shadow, I think.
Maybe Vic Mignon. Oh, God.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, God.
Horrified stare.
Let's start the podcast.
Would you like to talk about worse stuff now? I'm tired of talking about Shadow the Hedgehog.
Speaking of the government, we're going to do a brief update on legislation again.
So glad I found a stupid riff to put in.
That is a really good riff. I like transitional music, and I like hardcore guitar solos because I'm an American. Legally, I'm required to.
Sadly, I did have to add the red-tailed hawk. I mean, eagle myself, but, you know.
What about your red-tailed hog?
Shut up and talk about legislation.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So first up, we've got Idaho House Bill 538. This was introduced on February 9th, passed by the House on April 3rd, and signed by Governor Brad Little, you fuck,
again
on April 8th. Goes into effect on July 1st of this year. And it's a pronouns bill. Woohoo!
Another one. Yay.
They said they drafted it to protect everybody's, quote, constitutional right to free speech and, quote, ensure that no person in the state of Idaho is compelled by any governmental entity to communicate statements that such citizens believe to be false. Ridiculous. And, you know, this is the thing that isn't happening anyway. They keep passing these pronoun bills and saying, you can't force us to gender you correctly. Sure, I can't. And I've never tried to. I can't think of any time a trans person has tried to legally compel the speech of a cis person to force them to use the correct pronouns.
I'd love to see it happen and see how poorly it goes.
I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not against it. But I'm saying I don't think it's happened. And I don't think we could. I mean, I don't think that's something that's going to hold up in court, right?
No.
There are situations where you can be penalized by your employer for essentially just being a dick, you know?
Sure.
The same thing if you went up to a cisgender woman and just kept calling her a man and he, him, and that. Like, yeah, you'd be reprimanded because that's shitty. You're being an asshole and you're making people uncomfortable. You don't need to pass a law about it, Brad.
Sure do wish the world worked the way that their weird, self-flagellating fantasy world worked, just for a day.
They're just so eager to prove that everybody's out to get them. But in a rare turn of events, this bill actually does, a lot of the time, these kind of don't acknowledge that what they're passing into law is already part of the Constitution, right? Of this country. They talk about the Constitution a lot. None of them seem to know what's in it.
Never read it once.
I'll go ahead and tell you, Bill of Rights pretty clear about your right to free speech and the fact that the government can't impugn upon you or compel you to say things that you don't want to say. I feel like that's pretty common knowledge. I'm sure I learned that in public school. I guess these guys didn't. But this bill actually acknowledges that. They basically said, by the way, we know that this is in the Constitution, but they feel that other government entities are not, quote, vigilantly protecting the people against such compelled speech. Again, I would love to know when and where. Can you name even one instance?
I can't think of a single one. I feel like they'd be going on about it for 3 or 4 days on Fox News if it did happen. Hell, they'd be doing it if it didn't happen. They'd be making it up to talk about it, and they haven't even bothered to do that stuff.
Haven't even bothered to make it up. They said, quote, there are increasing pressures by state government actors to compel public employees, as well as students in public schools, to communicate certain preferred personal titles and pronouns that many such employees and students do not prefer to communicate, specifically to compel the use of preferred personal titles and pronouns that do not correspond with the biological sex of the individual seeking to be referred to by such preferred personal titles or pronouns. What a fucking word salad, huh?
Incomprehensible to the average person, yeah.
Terrible. They're saying that people are being compelled to use titles and pronouns they don't want to use. Again, wrong, incorrect.
I guess it might be true in the case of students being forced to call a teacher by a new name after she finalizes her divorce or something, but...
Hold on now.
Calling somebody Miss or Mrs. X...
Are you telling me that people sometimes change their name when they're not transgender?
You know, I am telling you, it's the weirdest thing, but every once in a while you do legally change your name for reasons other than to deceive.
That's scary to think about, those poor children.
I hope they can adjust without mental trauma that lasts a lifetime.
Well, they're not going to be able to, because anybody who quote unquote violates this law is essentially giving the victim, whoever's been victimized by having to gender somebody correctly, the right to sue them.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. The bill says, quote, any person who is harmed by a government employer, public school, or public institution for higher education for violating the provisions of this section shall have a private cause of action for injunctive relief, monetary damages, reasonable attorney's fees and costs, and any other appropriate relief, and that any civil action brought pursuant to that section must be initiated within 2 years from the date that the violation occurs. So you've got a 2-year statute of limitations to sue somebody who made you call her miss.
Good Lord.
Destroy her in court.
Ruin her life. She didn't get divorced. She's tricking us.
She's bewitching us.
Well, unsurprisingly, Idaho's got other dog shit coming through. They've got House Bill 421, which was introduced January 23rd. It was passed by the House on April 3rd and signed again by Governor Brad Little, that little shit weasel, on April 9th. It goes into effect July 1st, which that's the same as the other bill, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably just government. State legislature usually works in certain periods of time, and so they'll adjourn for a session, and then at a certain date after that, the laws they've passed will go into effect.
Right.
Sometimes they'll pass laws that go into effect immediately. It just kind of depends on the state and what the law is.
Well, thankfully, this is not one of those, but it is another one of those copy-paste. There are only 2 genders. Rah, rah, rah. You can't change my mind about that, bills. Of note, the bill defines the word person to also mean corporation in a very Romney-esque move. Really appreciate that. And it says, quote, rare disorders of sexual development are not exceptions to the binary nature of sex. So that they have actually figured out that intersex people are real and that they've got a new category of person to discriminate against. So that's fun, I guess.
Woohoo!
And it also makes it impossible to amend your birth certificate if you're an adult.
If I remember right, it stipulates that you can change birth certificates for up to 1 year and only for clerical errors. So that completely throws out any adult who wants to have their birth certificate changed to reflect their current gender identity.
Extremely fun, extremely cool.
So, fuck Idaho. Let's talk about those are our big updates right now. Let's talk about Louisiana, though. Specifically House Bills 121 and 122, neither of which is actually passed as of recording, but what's fun about these, the Louisiana House legislators actually met during like a really horrible storm to try to pass these or at least work on these bills, right? Mm-hmm. This is a storm that had like 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts and over 3 to 5 inches of what local news described as torrential rain. They had power outages, schools closed, but the Republicans were like, we have to get into office to discriminate against trans people.
There's only so many days in the year. Let me in.
Some local reporting suggested that most of the Democratic legislatures were not present. It seems to me like a certain number of non-present legislators should probably mean you just can't work on or pass laws. But, you know, they said, fuck it, we ball.
As so oft they do.
Oh, yeah. The specifics of these bills. House Bill 121 is called the Given Name Act. It requires educators to use given names or, quote, biological pronouns for students unless they have written permission from students' parents stating otherwise. And even if they get that permission, at their own discretion, they can just keep misgendering and dead naming their trans students, you know, as a little treat.
Extremely cool.
House Bill 122, without getting too deep in the weeds on that, is just kind of another don't say gay style bill, but for Louisiana instead of Florida.
Not a huge fan of how quickly these are spreading.
Certainly not. Ron DeSantis is a plague upon the earth.
God, what doesn't he have his fingers in right now that he shouldn't?
I don't know, but I can tell you what he doesn't have his toes all the way to the end of. His shoes. You little tiny footed bitch.
Such a dainty step on that man.
I love that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Ron DeSantis boots. You'll get about 1,000 little images where you can tell that like the way his boots crumple, his toes kind of only go like halfway to the boot tip. A lot of people believe he's wearing lifts to make himself seem taller, which is exactly the kind of small-minded, toxic, masculine shit I would expect from a dweeb like that.
Such a sad thing for him to get stuck fixating on. Like, it's just feet. Who cares?
I can't tell you if House Bills 121 or 122 are going to pass yet. I wouldn't be terribly surprised Louisiana is in kind of a bad way in terms of conservative legislation currently. We'll just have to wait and see. But just so you know, absolutely no inclement weather will stop Republicans from attacking trans people. That is a promise.
As many working days as possible to make sure our language is as transphobic as it could possibly be. And if not, your money back.
Thank you to Louisiana Illuminator reporter Piper Hutchinson for covering that. That's who I found out about that from, reading her tweets. So we appreciate you reporting on that. I said that we're done with Idaho.
You lied.
Anything else going on there? Oh, no.
I can't believe you would lie to me. In fact, Idaho is getting potentially much worse. The Supreme Court of the United States delivered an emergency ruling regarding Idaho's House Bill 71, which passed April 4th of 2023, and it was effective January 1st of this year. I don't remember how much we got into the weeds on House Bill 71 when we first talked about it, but it bans surgeries on minors, which are nothing that happens. This is not a thing that happens widely. It also banned puberty blockers that would delay, quote, normal puberty and cross-sex hormones. Pretty standard boilerplate, get all of that out of here kind of bill.
Yeah, none of which apply to cisgender children, by the way.
No, of course not. If you have a precocious puberty, then it's fine, but as soon as you have gender thoughts, it's very illegal.
Just don't think about gender.
Just
and you're
don't
fine.
gender. A federal district court in Idaho had previously provided statewide injunctive relief, preventing Idaho from enforcing the bill while it was being debated in court. But either way, SCOTUS has stepped in. They're providing injunctive relief so that the state can, in fact, enforce all of this nonsense while it's in court.
Because if you don't know a lot about the Supreme Court currently, first of all, you need to pay more attention. Bad things are happening. And you need to be aware of them. The Supreme Court currently has 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices. Now, this was pretty much a party line vote kind of deal. They like to say that justices are apolitical, right? Or they don't have a political party.
Right.
If you ever want to know whether or not a justice has a political ideology, just figure out, look up which president appointed them. It's pretty straightforward. If a conservative president wanted you on the Supreme Court, it's because you're a conservative legislator.
Oh, yeah.
And that holds true, like across the board with our current lineup. So all of the conservative justices were in agreement about this. Chief Justice John Roberts didn't say how he voted. He refused to divulge that information, but I feel safe assuming he voted with the rest of the conservatives.
It'll be a fun, gross surprise for later.
And the more liberal justices voted against this, but there are, 3 of them to the 6 conservative justices, so fuck you. So they essentially were just narrowing the scope of injunctive relief here.
Right.
Where, like you said previously, this relief applied to everybody in the state. Now it just applies to the 2 trans girls who are named as plaintiffs against the state in this case. So they can continue to get their meds. Every other trans person in Idaho can eat shit and die, according to the Supreme Court. Thanks for that.
Really appreciate it. It's got to be terrible to have that relief granted and then just have it yanked away from you a little while later, too.
I can't imagine, but I will say that if you are able to access DIY hormones, do that. And if any journalists ask you where you get them from, tell them to go to hell.
Yeah, there has been a reporter from, The Guardian, asking around.
The Guardian, yeah.
Don't talk to them about this one. Don't talk about it.
Yeah. Don't do an interview. Hey, I'm a journalist. I often do reporting. Don't trust journalists. I'll just put that out there.
Especially her.
You don't, right. If you're doing something quasi-legal, you don't need to tell journalists about that. You don't need to tell them anything. You need to assume that what they want is not in your best interest, because that is generally true.
It's like talking to the police. Don't tell them anything you don't have to. Speaking of evil.
So, Evil Justice League, Alliance Defending Freedom, who suck, are arguing the state's case and claim that the federal court's injunctive relief that blocked the entire bill was unfair and out of scope because the plaintiffs are only seeking one treatment, which is HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and the relief blocked over 20 procedures and treatments that would be criminalized by the bill. Essentially, their argument is, hey, we're trying to do a bunch of evil things. These girls only want to stop one of those. Why should the whole bill be blocked?
We're more evil than you thought we were 20 minutes ago. Ha ha ha. Ha ha.
I'm trying to explain to you how fucking evil I am.
Stop interrupting me while I'm monologuing.
Alliance Defending Freedom sucks. They're a very litigatory and advisory group to a lot of other anti-LGBTQ groups, organizations, people, etc. They're terrible. They're working on this. And it should also be pointed out that the conservative justices who made this decision made it very clear that the reason that they're wading in was specifically to admonish the federal courts who are doing what they think is overreach in their use of injunctive relief. So we talked about this with a few other bills. There will be situations where a state will pass this very broad ban on any kind of transitional care you can think of, and then they'll get sued by the ACLU. And while that's sitting in court, because it can take, a year, 2 years, 3 years, they're not allowed to enforce that bill. And that's a good thing. The Supreme Court thinks it's not. The Supreme Court thinks that people should be able to suffer under these bills while the legality, the constitutionality of these bills is still up for debate in the courts.
I would say right now, if you are in a state where there's, I would say almost any kind of potential legal action against your ability to access hormones, start looking into alternatives. I know moving is just not an option for most people. It's expensive and it's shitty to just say, hey, just get up and move. But I would at the very least, look into other ways that you can access your hormones. And don't talk to any reporters who ask you how you got them.
Don't talk to reporters. Talk to your friends. Talk to other trans people in your community. Figure out, there are places you can get these hormones. They're honestly very simple, both to acquire and to take, as long as you figure out a way to monitor your blood work and ensure that you're getting your medicine from reasonably trustworthy sources, you should be fine. Quote me on that. I support DIY hormones. I don't care. I don't give a shit.
I'd say that's the right way to be right about now.
Absolutely, because guess what? We're not stopping at Idaho. The Supreme Court is probably going to make decisions about similar bills in Tennessee and Kentucky soon, and the sky is the limit from there. I have no reason to believe they won't just say the same exact thing in every other red state where this is happening. We'll see how that unfolds over the next few months. I would expect if you live in a state where you are currently only getting your medicine because of an appeals court or federal court injunctive relief, you need to start thinking about where you're going to get them that is not through normal channels. Anyway, after that explosive segment,
oh no,
let's move on to our next topic of conversation, shall we?
Literal bomb threats, my favorite.
Oops, who could be doing those? Who could be inspiring bomb threats?
Well, so starting March 11th, libs of TikTok took issue with Planet Fitness having trans-inclusive locker room policies, which is unsurprising. They hate all things good in this world. So since then, at least 48 Planet Fitness locations have received bomb threats.
That's incredible. That's so many bomb threats.
That's an epidemic level. That's insane. I don't think I've heard of that much of a rash of bomb threats since, I don't know, the last time we had issues.
Since the last time libs of TikTok did it.
The last time this happened, yeah.
Yeah, so on this topic, libs of TikTok's outrage began with sharing a video of a Planet Fitness customer who was bitching about, quote, a man shaving in the women's bathroom. She included a picture of the supposed perpetrator.
A cool move.
Sure, and we don't know who this person is. We don't know if this is a trans person. We don't know if this is like a psyop cis man. I've seen people on Twitter claiming that this is some right-wing person pretending to be trans. Now, I don't know if that's true. I can't verify that in any capacity. Certainly not something that would surprise me. But, bottom line, quit taking pictures of people in locker rooms, you freak.
Who cares where they shave?
On March 12th, libs of TikTok shared an alleged email exchange between the woman and Planet Fitness in which they really just kind of replied by restating their trans-inclusive locker room policies to her. And then on March 14th, libs of TikTok shared another video of the woman now claiming that her Planet Fitness membership had been revoked.
I'd say the wildest part of this is that there's no real evidence. Most of what has been shared is just this woman ranting in the parking lot of a strip mall that happens to have a Planet Fitness in it, which is my favorite kind of evidence. Planet Fitness confirmed the woman's claims of having had her membership revoked specifically because she violated the social media policy, which, as anyone who's ever belonged to any kind of gym or anything will probably tell you, not sharing pictures of strangers in the locker room is usually written in there somewhere in pretty bold lettering.
Absolutely. You know, this woman signed up for a membership. She agreed to their terms of service, and then she violated them willfully and like extremely publicly, right? Libs of TikTok has, I think, 3 or 4 million followers. Blasting pictures of a stranger in a locker room in a Planet Fitness to 4 million people, probably just not going to go well for you.
As the story went viral, Libs of TikTok shared a Daily Mail article which claims that Planet Fitness had lost, quote, $400 million in stock market value, which is just excellent. Citizen journalist. Good work.
Yeah. That's, I think, how she described herself in the Taylor Lawrence interview, that she's a citizen journalist. Which I want to be clear, and I think I've said this before, not a real thing. We don't go through like a course. You know, there isn't like a sticker you get.
It says against them. The thin
you just start
videotape
reporting.
line? I don't know what the hell kind of line it is.
The thin gray line? I don't know.
Help, I'm colorblind.
The thin beige line? I don't even think that's true. I'm pretty sure they haven't lost that much. I don't know if they've lost any value in their stocks. Not that I give a shit, but I do think it's funny that she was like, look, the Daily Mail said that they lost $400 million because I'm so fucking cool. Like, what would I even give a shit about that for? There's this weird thing. Conservatives do this thing where they do like brand wars.
They love it. They love burning stuff.
Yeah, you saw this a lot with like Bud Light and like, who was it? Kid Rock, I think, opening up on a 6-pack with a fucking machine gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, you guys know I don't care about Bud Light, right? Like,
I'm not joining the Bud Light wars on anyone's side. Sorry, guys.
Right. I don't know if I've made this clear. I think mostly queer people don't give a shit about these brands because most of us are savvy enough to know that we're being pandered to make money. Now, I will say, I appreciate that Planet Fitness has a pretty damn inclusive locker room policy.
Sure. That
basically amounts to trans people are allowed to be in the locker room that's right for them, and you need to leave them the fuck alone.
Do not take pictures of people in the locker room.
Right. We'll see if that holds up. We'll see if they stick to their guns on that. We've seen other companies fold when the heat comes in from people like Libs of TikTok.
Target did fold last Pride after they had things like, what was it, binders, I think, and swimwear.
Cowards.
Yeah, that sucked a lot.
So, and thanks to Media Matters, specifically Alyssa Terrell and Mia Gingrich, reporting on this. That's where I got all this information from for our script to discuss. And I'm just going to flat out quote them here because there's a really good passage about like what's going on here. So to quote Media Matters, they said, in the subsequent weeks, Libs of TikTok has continued to post about the gym, attempting to generate outrage by accusing Planet Fitness of a range of offenses, including discriminating against white people, grooming kids, putting a mentally ill man's delusions before women's safety, and allowing people to act out their sexual fetishes in public. The account has published dozens of posts on the gym, garnered thousands of reposts, and seemingly caused both hashtag boycott Planet Fitness and Planet Fitness to trend. I think it's really funny to watch High Chick work in so much as she sort of, something goes viral because she tweets a lot.
Constantly.
She tweets a completely unhinged volume of tweets. And a surprising number of them don't actually get a ton of traction. But whenever one does, boy, she digs in. She absolutely digs in and just goes nuts on it. And you're seeing that here. Just her trying to milk as much content out of this 1-0 burger as she possibly can. And it's not, and I should point out too, I don't know, I can't recall if we've discussed this on a previous episode, but this is not the first time we've seen Libs of TikTok posts generating bomb threats. I mean, we're talking hospitals, universities, libraries, high schools. I think elementary schools even.
Yeah.
And now gym franchise.
No business is safe. Not a single one.
No business, no person. You know, when we talked about Next Benedict and the teacher at Owasso High School, or I think Owasso Elementary School maybe, who had resigned from the school like in the year before Nex's death.
Yeah.
He resigned because of loops of TikTok. You gotta wonder when the FBI is gonna intervene, right? I mean, you know, far be it for me to make any libelous or defamatory statements on this podcast, but like, you got to be straight up about the facts here. Libs of TikTok posts about somebody and they receive 1 billion bomb threats in a week. It's not an accident. She knows it's happening. Her personal Twitter account, the avatar, is a picture of her holding a USA Today newspaper where on the front page, the headline reads something like, "When Libs of TikTok posts, bomb threats follow." And she's smiling. She's giggling about it. She thinks it's funny. Ha ha, ha ha, I inspire bomb threats. Hee hee.
I've endangered lives. What a precocious trickster am I.
Ah ha ha, so whimsical. You know, this is exactly what stochastic terrorism is. She thinks that people invented that phrase for her. They didn't, obviously. But that's what she's doing. And, you know, eventually somebody's going to get hurt and she's going to be culpable for that. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I would really like her to just quietly go away forever without anybody being hurt. But I think that's kind of the direction that she's going, frankly. Do you have anything dumber that you can talk about?
I would love to bring us back down to a level of, I wouldn't say harmless stupidity, but I'll say Oklahoma Athletic Commission levels of stupidity, if you'd like to join me on a weird little adventure here.
Ooh, well, what kind of athletics might we be talking about? Something very serious, maybe? Baseball, football, basketball?
It's professional wrestling and not Olympic level wrestling.
Professional wrestling?
Yes, which is...
We're talking Stone Cold Steve Austin. We're talking The Rock. Do you smell what he's talking? I don't know. Listen, one of us is really into professional wrestling. One of us finds it amusing, but doesn't know a lot about it. Listener, I beg you to guess which is which. Wait, before we do that, I want to amend my statement at the start of the podcast.
Okay.
My favorite person in wrestling is the guy who throws Stone Cold Steve Austin his beers.
Hell yeah, that is probably the best guy who's ever done it. The consistency.
That guy is my favorite. Absolutely. If you've never seen it, look up. There are like 1 billion YouTube videos of it. It's like a thing that Steve Austin does. Is he like retired?
He retired,
does he wrestle
a long
anymore?
time ago.
Yeah. So back when he was still like in the game, he'd go out to the ring. He'd the square, if you will.
The square, as they call it, yeah.
As they call it, the square with the turn, and he'd just receive 2 beers from like across the stadium. Like somebody would like spiral throw like Super Bowl football throw 2 cold beers to him, and he'd catch them and crack them open and drink them. And it's very much like a dude's rock kind of thing, in my opinion. I love that guy. So that guy's my favorite. He's not a wrestler, but he's certainly a cornerstone of the history of professional wrestling.
Without him, Stone Cold would not be covered in nearly as much beer as he was at the end of every show.
Anyway, what were you talking about?
So back in January, the Oklahoma State Athletic Commission discussed penalizing All Elite Wrestling, which is not the biggest wrestling organization in the world, which is the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. AEW was founded as a second major wrestling organization run by the son of a billionaire. It's a fairly big deal right now. And Oklahoma discussed penalizing them because they have a transgender woman named Nyla Rose who wrestled at an event in December. She's been with the company since 2019. She's not a new hire or anything. This was a known factor that she would be there and wrestling. It took them a little while. They decided they discussed penalizing, only because AEW was ratted out by a local unnamed smaller wrestling organization who had been previously penalized for doing the same thing. And then they simperingly agreed that, they've been very bad and they would never do it again, daddy. And then, of course, they turned around and did it again because what else are you going to do?
Oh, disgusting, you little rat fucks. Those, and I'll tell you, they're not named in any of the reporting on this, but I wish they were.
I would love to know who it was, because wrestling's a lot of good old boy, everyone knows everyone stuff at the territory level. So I guarantee it's someone known. Apparently, most sports that are monitored by the OSAC have competitor forums that ask if you've had gender reassignment. But pro wrestling forums do not, for some reason.
Yeah, I like the way they phrase it, gender reassignment. And I will say, on a personal level, not my business. And like even if she had filled out a form that had that question on it, that she would just be like, no, I haven't had gender reassignment.
What are you gonna do about it?
What are you gonna come fucking reassign my gender about it?
You know, actually what they might do is they might bar you from fighting strange things, because the Athletic Commission includes, alongside their anti-transgender policies, that you can't fight non-human opponents in wrestling matches, which means possibly Nyla could wrestle a gator now. That'd be a pretty big draw.
Ooh. I'd watch the hell out of that. I mean, that would be unbelievably dangerous for Nyla Rose.
Stupid.
And I wouldn't want her to be put in harm's way. And yet, God, it would be so interesting to see. I just gotta wonder, that kind of like saying about like rules exist because somebody broke them or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
I gotta wonder what prompted the non-human opponents clause of OSAC's rules, because it's not, there aren't gators in Oklahoma. If this was Florida, I would 100% be like, it was somebody wrestled a gator and they said, you can't fucking do
Day
that,
one,
man.
Dave dragged his gator in and then we were all paying for it afterwards.
So I gotta wonder what prompted the addition of that rule. That's because that's not a rule you think of on the first pass.
I mean, if you think about it, wrestling did have its roots in traveling carnival behavior. It's possible that, I know, in like the 40s or 50s, a circus showed up in town with a guy who wrestles gators, and people were like, hey, wait a second. What if one of my kids gets bit by a fucking gator?
We gotta make this illegal.
Well, Tony Khan, who is the president and CEO of AEW, was questioned about the commission's potential penalty during a media event on Thursday, which was April 18th. It was an hour-long talk in which he discussed many things, and of course this came up. He stated he was unaware of the issue, he doesn't think they did anything wrong, and he was disappointed by the Athletic Commission's stance, which is great. He said, quote, transgender people have rights, and both he and the company stand behind Rose. And given how long that Nyla's been with the company, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh, absolutely.
He was also asked if they continued to plan running wrestling events in Oklahoma, and he said he'll do anything they can to support their fans in Oklahoma, and it's something they'll have to think about, but he has not actually committed to running any future events there. So he's not committal on that.
And this was
front.
their first event there.
Yes.
The first event they had ever done there.
So it could be a one and done situation depending on how their Athletic Commission acts, which is pretty shitty. Pretty
shitty, because I mean, this guy clearly is like normal about trans people.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be like, Nyla, you can't come with us.
No. That would be
because she's like fairly famous. Like I didn't know a ton about her or anything before this cropped up, but like I had heard her name. Like I was aware of her existence.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't give a shit about pro wrestling.
That news had to find you specifically.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that she's, not just like somebody they're going to throw away or not give a shit about, not consider in their moves in Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean, they're certainly not just going to eat the possible financial penalty. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. But hey, before you go thinking that Oklahoma is just a bunch of bigots and they all suck, I did find a quote from a local wrestler, Logan Knight, who his Twitter says he's the pride of Oklahoma City. And he said, quote, transgender people should be able to wrestle whoever they want. In wrestling, you should truly be able to wrestle whoever you want. We're not voiceless. The people, they have a voice. Obviously, you can only do so much with social media. And as much as I keep barking on social media, it's bound to fall into the right person's lap and get in front of the right eyes. Maybe we can get some actual support to actually legally take the commission down.
Oh God, that'd be
great.
I love
that. He said he wants to take the Oklahoma State Athletic Commission down.
And I'll tell you just how I'm going to do it, Batman.
It's Logan Knight standing in the center of the ring, like pointing pointing out, and he's like, and I'm coming for you, Oklahoma State Athletic Commission.
This Sunday at the Wrestle Slam.
Shoots and ladders, fireballs. In a spit-swapping makeout match. Okay.
Loser has to... No, never mind. I'm not going to say that on the podcast.
Nope. So anyway, Nyla Rose tweeted about this incident. She said, "Don't worry, Oklahoma. I'll find the dastardly transgender that checks notes. Entertained fans. How dare they make people happy?"
I got to reiterate, this is not like Olympic level wrestling. This is, you put on a predetermined outcome sort of show where you just throw each other around in a ring and play for a while.
This is
professional wrestling.
This is one of those things, you know, where a lot of people will be like, don't you know wrestling isn't real, right? And then you get the Max Landis video, the wrestling isn't wrestling thing. And it's like, people who like professional wrestling obviously know it isn't real. There used to be a guy named The Undertaker who like pretend to like have zombies or ghosts.
He would strike his opponents with lightning sometimes. It was a whole thing. He couldn't be killed. just looking like Bobby Jules standing there and saying, "Dang, he really struck him with lightning." Also, people believe that Hulk Hogan's physique was caused by vitamins.
Oh my goodness. If you ever, I have some vague understanding of like the like 70s, 80s, 90s kind of vibe.
Sure. Yeah.
Of just like nonstop pain and drugs.
Oh yeah.
Like professional wrestling. Like it used to be pretty horrifying. But the bottom line here is like, this is not, you know, nobody thinks professional wrestling is real, but by acknowledging this as an athletic event, I feel like Oklahoma is saying, or at least the Oklahoma State Athletic Commission is saying, that wrestling is real.
It's still real to me, God damn it.
I don't even know what to think about that. I will say Alejandra Lyon, who was Nyla Rose's opponent in the match in December, also tweeted about this, and she said, quote, "Truly at a loss of words. Reading this breaks my heart. Nyla is seriously one of the safest and sweetest wrestlers I have ever been in the ring with, and she does not deserve this kind of hate."
Hell yeah.
So you just got to wonder, like, the CEO of this company, all of the people who attended this event, all of the people who are fans of AEW and professional wrestling in general, local wrestlers, Nyla's opponent, none of them give a shit about this. This is not a problem to them.
This is an Oklahoma issue, tragically.
Right. So why is the OSAC making this a problem? It's ridiculous. It's absurd. But you heard it here first. Wrestling is real.
We've survived all the bad news for the week. Thank God.
Yeah, so let's tackle, before we end this podcast, some trans joy, as we try to do every week. Not always easy, and the volume of joy varies a bit from week to week.
Unfortunately.
But we always try to find something. And what I got this week for you is that a federal appeals court has ruled that West Virginia can't bar a trans girl from participating on a track team.
Yay.
The plaintiff, Becky Pepper Jackson, which is a funny name. I'm just gonna
a little bit.
Just gonna say it. She sounds like a character in an Archie comic. I love her.
Maybe an extra in Pepper Ann.
God, don't speak not to me of Pepper Ann. But Becky Pepper Jackson, who is in fucking middle school, has identified as a girl from a very young age. I don't know exactly how young. She's 13 now. And she's identified as a girl for years, so a very long time. She's never experienced any kind of puberty. So this federal court said that barring her from participating on the track team at her school would be a really blatant violation of her Title IX rights. Judge Haytens, who wrote the majority opinion, stated, quote, "The question before us is whether the act may lawfully be applied to prevent a 13-year-old transgender girl who takes puberty-blocking medication and is publicly identified as a girl since the 3rd grade from participating in her school's cross-country and track teams. We hold it cannot." to be clear, this doesn't necessarily help a big swath of people. Judge Hayden's also said that, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he also said that it's really not the appeals court's place to rule on the broader legality of this West Virginia bill that's trying to ban all trans people from all sports. But in this pretty specific narrow case for Becky Pepper Jackson, she's allowed to play. Sport continues to be a human right.
But yeah, you love to see it. It's not a huge victory, but I'll take the slivers at this point.
I'll take any win we can get.
Each and every dub, please. Starving over here.
This episode of What the Trans US edition was written and presented by Alyssa Steinzik.
And Valeriya Martindale, and I'm the one editing it.
Thanks so much to our Yui Carlberg, who created our fantastic intro and outro music and also revamped the music for our UK counterparts. You can find her socials at linktr.ee/ethereal UK music. That's a link tree with all of her stuff. Go check it out. She's an awesome musician.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much to our wonderful patrons.
Bernice Roust.
Ellen Malore.
Jay Hoskins.
Trowen.
Ashley.
Maddie B.
Squidzina.
Setcab.
Jane.
Roberto de Pronk.
Rose Absolute.
Sarah.
Cena.
Kiki T.
Derek.
Sky Killian.
Eric Widman.
B.
Jude.
Monsieur Squirrel.
Fergus Evans.
Anubis a Jackal.
Kamina.
Brandon Craig.
Break the System.
Sean Phillips.
Heidi Riordan.
Ezra.
Sophia the Sixth.
Lintel.
Philippa Taprog.
Alethea Aurora.
Clara Vuliemi.
Amelia.
Corvina Ravenheart, the trans metal DJ from Twitch and VR chat, will play St. Lucifer for props.
Tabitha Jo Cox, aka Candy.
Fiona McDonnell.
Torikuso H.
Murgatroyd.
Ontologically Unjust.
Stella.
Cindergosa.
Rebecca Prentice.
Crazy Richard.
Dan Oblivion.
Florence Stanley.
The Cthulhu Kid.
Helen _
Chrissy Jarvis.
Ellie Hollingsworth bought too many magic cards.
Nick Ross.
Alice Chalkley.
Fiona Punchard.
John.
Nick Duffy.
C.B. Bailey.
Gordon Cameron.
Ted Delphos.
Wen Riverup.
Vic Parsons.
Patreon user.
Vic Kelly.
Catherine.
Sabrina McVeigh.
Cassius Adair.
Melissa Brooks.
Karakin 12.
April Heller.
Sophie Lewis.
Alexandra Lilly.
Claire Scott.
Ariadne Pena.
Lauren Onions.
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean.
Lanos.
And Chris Hubley. Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye forever.
Bye.
We both died. You'll never be able to hear us
in
again.
real life.
Sorry.